Hi, welcome back to the channel. This episode will be talking about the contract extension that Mike Brown received from the Kings and what I feel like the Kings should be looking into this off season. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe down below. Be greatly appreciated. If you haven't noticed already, I have a special guest this episode, my sister, Bridget, who, like me, is a lifelong Kings fan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No,
Excited to get into it.
it's fun to actually have someone to talk to this time instead of just people hearing me talk. So, like I was saying, the Kings finally gave a contract extension to a coach for the first time since Rick Adelman, which is crazy when you think about it. It's been 20 something years. So Mike Brown got the extension through 26, 27, 8.5 mil with bonuses reaching up to 10 mil a year. What's your take on that?
As a fan, I'm excited. I think this was the first thing the Kings definitely needed to get done. Just at looking in their off season, there are definitely teams who would have taken him gladly and would love to have Mike Brown as a coach. Um, Personally, as a fan, I ran into Coach Brown a few weeks ago, and like there couldn't be a nicer person in the world. I think the chemistry that he strikes with his players is fantastic, and we're lucky to have him. So I'm glad that the negotiations didn't drag on too long, and with only a little bit of drama, so we could make sure to lock him in.
Yeah, there's always a being a Kings fan. There's always that concern that they're gonna, as a saying is, Kings, which they're gonna somehow screw it up,
Let's
and
watch it.
he's gonna be gone, and the next thing you know, we're the laughing stock of the NBA again. Which now
Yeah,
it looks like that's gonna be might be the Lakers with their coaching search and hiring
your debacle.
LeBron's best friend and JJ Redick, and then possibly signing his son. For once, I'm happy I'm not a Laker fan because that's going to be a circus. That's
The
an
LeBron, the LeBron Lakers.
Yeah, that's a topic of another discussion. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's nice that they got that was the first piece of this offseason was contract extension for Mike Brown.
yeah.
So they got him and they got Monte McNair for
Mm-hmm.
for the future. Now comes
There,
now comes the hard.
Yeah, the question is, you said there are the bonuses. So what side of those bonuses? Are we looking at making a legitimate run now that we have that consistency as a coach? We know what he's capable of with the roster he's been given up to this point in terms of 2 years ago making the playoffs for the first time
In forever.
like almost 2 decades,
Yeah.
like forever. Last year, missing the playoffs, obviously a lot went into that in terms of Malik Monk's injury and just the West being
Kevin Herter getting
super
in.
difficult. Yeah. But are we looking at making a potential run between now and that 2026, 2027 season of, being in serious contention for a championship?
Yeah.
Because as a
So
fan, that's the goal.
yeah. So I think a lot of it now it resides on McNair getting a roster for him to help develop. And I will say though, last year he wasn't as they were almost as good as they were the previous year. In the West, it got better, and the Kings stayed still. But one of the main problems with them last year was end of game. That's
Yeah,
the thing they need to get better at. They had so many games where they were up by
that
20
was painful.
and they lost. And that is on
And I'm wondering what that is. Is that stamina, or is that not having that like winner attitude of like, locking it in after halftime, making sure that like you have that fierce competitive nature? What was missing there that caused so many games to fall apart?
I think that falls on players and coaches not making adjustments. So yes,
Yeah.
it's on the players, but again, like I said, that some of that does fall on Mike Brown for it happening over and over and over and over. It wasn't just one or two
Yeah.
times. It seemed like every time they're up by 20, it's like, all right, it's going to happen. They're going to lose this. There's no doubt about that. But like I said, it's gonna come down this now. It's the falls on to McNair to give him a roster that's competitive in this West, which we saw this year is very competitive because everyone around them got better either in the offseason or at the trade deadline, and they just stayed pat and did nothing, and it came back to haunt them at the end to where every team got better, they stayed pat, and nothing happened. Them and the Warriors, they too, for the most part, they stayed pat, and we saw what happened. They got to the play-in. Kings beat the Warriors, but like I've told you before, they're similar styles. They're both small. And then the Kings go and play the Pelicans. And I told you and Mom from the very beginning, they can't beat the Pelicans. Pelicans were just too big. And it showed out this whole year, 0-5 against the Pelicans. So now it's up to McNair. What should the Kings, what do you feel like the Kings should look into this offseason? Like players, what should be one of their main priorities, do you think?
Well, looking at how we ended the season, those 2 play-in games, like you kind of mentioned, like they couldn't have been more different in terms of how the Kings showed up, how they handled their opponents. We saw with Kings versus Warriors, Keon Ellis really shone. He showed up defensively. I think he's one of those players when he shows up defensively and gets his game going, then his offense catches on. He's a defense first player, but when he gets that rhythm going, he can make some shots as well, which obviously was a big help to them in that game. And then that allowed Keegan Murray to take a step back defensively and focus on his offense, and he got his rhythm going, and he was the highest scorer of the game. So obviously Keegan Murray being able to focus on his offense, is great to him. You made the point, previous conversation that when we're looking at the Pelicans, they're a bigger team, and Keon, so he's not a big enough guy to be that lead defensive player that he was able to be against the Warriors. And Keegan had to step up more as the big man and play that defensive role, and his offense suffered from it. So I think we got to be looking at size.
Yeah, and
who else with size can we put out there?
Yeah, and like I've said before, like Keon, he's great. I think he would be a great backup point guard off the bench because to me, similar, and we're gonna get into this with Monk, they're too small in that back court. If you have Fox and Ellis, they're both 6'3", 6'4", where most two guards are 6'7", like Herter. I know you're not a huge fan of Herter, but he's 6'7". He offers size. So last year he had one of probably his worst years ever, and it's like I don't really expect that again from him to have a bad year like that. And he's tall. You can't have 2 6'3" guys in the backcourt. It can't happen because people just shoot over the top of them. And like we saw, any team that the Kings played that had forwards that were athletic just dominated the Kings. It didn't matter whether they were really good. They just dominated. And every time they played him, I'll tell you guys, this guy's going to go off for like 30 points. He's a no-namer, but he's going to go off for 30. And it's because, like when you talk about Keegan Murray, he can only do so much. If he's playing defense, his offense is going to suffer. And the other problem is if you put him on the best on-ball guy, well, then who else do they have? They can't rely on Harrison Barnes. He's a trap. Yeah.
So then that's just opening up another shooter.
Yeah. So it's like he's a traffic cone on defense. Therefore, someone else is going to go off, and he may stop his guy to only score maybe a 15. But then the problem is the other guy is going off for 30 because they have Harrison Barnes.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing against Harrison. He did his job here. The last couple, he was that veteran leadership that they needed. But I feel like Fox and Sabonis, they have that vet leadership now.
Yeah, for context for everyone listening, BJ and I have a running feud, especially this past season, of Barnes versus Herter, and I'm definitely pro Barnes. I know, his performance was spotty this season, but I always think he brings a lot to the table, like you said, in terms of his veteran leadership. I think he brings a lot to the table, and that's not showing up on the stat line. But we went back and forth all season, especially when the trade deadline came around. Like BJ saying, we got to get rid of Barnes, and me being like, Herter's the problem. Get rid of Herter. He doesn't have those other X factor type qualities that Barnes, brought to the table. Barnes, you almost kind of know what you're going to get. Herter was just so inconsistent, and then obviously got injured. So
you can say that, but
it does look like going into this off season though that probably both of them are going to be gone. So I think we'll both kind of get what we want out of that.
But you say Barnes is consistent, but the problem is he would have games where he would have like 15, 20 points. But that playoff game, like against the Pelicans, I think he only scored maybe 3 points. To me, he was consistently inconsistent. He would go for games, one in like 10 games, he would go for 20 and like, okay, we got Harrison. That
was the Kings in general this season, though. Like as a team, they were so inconsistent. You never knew what competitive level they were going to be showing up at with any given game. Because it's so frustrating to watch.
Yeah, when Harrison Barnes showed up, he went off and they killed. And like the Warriors, I think it was like the second or third game when he went off for 30 points.
Yeah,
that's the Harrison Barnes we need. But then there were a lot of stinkers against the Pelicans.
Yeah, and you're definitely not going to get that Harrison Barnes.
Yeah.
90% of the time. So
I think we can agree that we need. So what are some names out there that we can, or throw this out there? Should we look to re-sign Monk first? Or should we look for a 4? Or maybe even a 5 and move?
Yeah, I don't know that it has to be one or the other. Because if we're looking to bring someone new on, then we're speaking of a trade. And like I said, I think Herter and Barnes would be involved in that. Probably some draft options. So I think both can be accomplished. What's most important out of those two? Probably bringing on someone new. I love Malik Monk and the spark plug energy he brings to the table. I know he wants to be a starter, so and I think he deserves a starting spot. But if we were to run it back, put Malik Monk in the starting spot, and we don't bring anyone new on, I don't think we're helping our shot at postseason. Any. So I think the goal would be to accomplish both. Keep Malik Monk, give him a shot as a starter, but then you always know that worst comes to worst, he's a spark plug off the bench.
And
he got robbed of the six man of the year award this year. I think he should have hands down been the winner. So what we have in Malik Monk. It's a matter of bringing more size to the table, because again, Malik's not a big guy either.
No, he's only 6'3".
Really are missing that size.
And the thing is also with him is it's not as great as he was. He did have some games where he only went for like 5 points, and the problem is if he's not scoring, you're not getting anything from him. Like he is and that to me, he's perfect bench player because he comes in off that bench, and he may not be starting, but he finished like almost every single game. So it's like, but there's teams out there that are going to be throwing him money, and it's like,
and a starting position.
Yeah, like the first team that comes to mind is Orlando Magic. They're going to offer money because they need shooters, and he's, as the Magic found out this postseason, they have no shooters. They were terrible, and it's going to come down to, does he want the money or does he stay with the Kings because they offered him that opportunity to shine?
So as the Kings adjust and start looking, maybe pivot once that gets settled, or even kind of at the same time looking at the Malik Monk contract. The Kings kind of know what they can offer him. So at this point, it's just Malik seeing what his options are and making his decision. But it's really on the Kings front of the house to start looking at what they're going to add. And I've my two kind of names I'm going to bring to the table are Zach LaVine and Mikal Bridges, both with some great size. We looked at prior to this call, Zach LaVine looks like it's being reported. It looks like the Bulls are open to, if not hoping to, trade Zach LaVine.
Yeah.
So I think, he's someone at 19.5 points per game last year, 5.2 rebounds. He's kind of what we are hoping Keegan's going to turn into. But putting someone like that on the team, having that presence on the court, I think would make a huge difference.
The only thing with LaVine that I question is health. Last year, he only played 25 games.
Yeah.
So will he?
And we saw how much an injury can derail a season.
Yeah, exactly. So
this year, so
and let's not forget the Kings tried to get him before, but the Bulls were able to match that contract that they offered. And I mean, I wouldn't mind LaVine. It's just a matter of also once the season starts, the Bulls are getting ball back, and the Bulls were playoff, and you could even say Eastern Conference contenders when they had LaVine, DeRozan, Ball, and Caruso all playing together. They were a dominant team. So when the season starts, it's going to be interesting. I think it'll depend on, they'll wait to see how the season goes before they trade LaVine. That's how I personally think. They'll wait to see how everyone plays, see how they are. If they start off cold, they're going to be a fire sale. Everyone's gone, I feel like, because they didn't trade anyone this past season because they knew they were getting ball back, and they want to run it back to see how they are fully healthy as a team. Because there was so many options that people wanted Caruso. The Kings were in on Caruso, but they want to see how.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a chemistry issue there though, because being reported as of a few days ago, it looks like Chicago is pretty open to trading Zach LaVine and concerns potentially even about trying to get him off the roster and bring in another piece. And then, switching to Mikal Bridges, he's someone who's a couple years younger than Zach LaVine, so he's 27. So he's, right around the same age, I think a little bit, maybe a little bit older than like Fox Sabonis. But, he would bring a big presence. His averaging points and rebounds are a little bit less than LaVine, but not significantly less. I think he brings a lot to the table offensively, and maybe has that size we need defensively.
The big thing with him, 82 games last year, and the year before he played 83. One of the few people that have ever played 83 games in a season. And to me, the best, as the saying is, the best availability is availability. The more you can play, the better it is. As we've seen the last year with the Kings, they struggled with injuries, and it just derailed the season, like you said. And to me, that's big because he's how tall is he?
6'6", 209 pounds.
So he's not the tallest, but he's good. He's tall enough, and like I said, he's available.
Well, yeah, Zach LaVine's 6'5", so in that, in that comparison between the two, I'm bringing to the table, they're pretty close comparisons, honestly, with Mikal Bridges having one extra inch on Zach LaVine, and their numbers being pretty close. So I think they're pretty comparable, and would probably, with their experience levels, they'd probably be kind of plug and play on the Kings.
Yeah, and to me, I kind of like the Bridges just because, like I said, the availability. He doesn't get hurt.
That's true.
He's gonna play.
Probably the area then that he kind of edges out Zach LaVine in terms of potential production is having that availability.
And then the name that I'm gonna be blue in the face about until something happens is Kuzma. I think he would fit the Kings perfectly. He's tall, 6'9", plays defense. He would help Keegan Murray on the defensive end to where Keegan wouldn't have to be all him. He would have some help with LaVine. Only thing with LaVine is how's his head? Like, does he have to be the number one scorer?
Mm-hmm.
because I mean he's 6'9", but like I said, he could have left Washington this year. They had to trade to Dallas, and he said, "No, I want to stay here. I don't feel like they're a title contender." And look where they're at. They're in the finals. I want to build something here in Washington. You want to build something with a 15-67 record? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I mean, if he wants to build, he can come to Sacramento and build here. We're actually making a push to be in contention. So
yeah. And the Kings, I don't know if you
got a better shot of doing that here than he does in Washington. And I think this season, goes to show that.
And I don't know if you remember this, but the Kings had a trade on the table for him a couple years ago. It was Buddy Hield, and I forgot who else, for Kyle Kuzma, and I want to say Brandon Ingram. But the Lakers said no, and they traded for Westbrook, who at the time was on Washington. And that's how he got to Washington, was because of that trade. And that trade, if it would have went through, would have actually helped both teams, because the Lakers need shooting. So they could have used Buddy Hield. And I would have loved having Kuzma on that. We could have used Kuzma and Ingram. But so, I mean, he would have been perfect then, and he's perfect now. And then I'm going to throw a name out there that I haven't mentioned yet, is Valanciunas of the Pelicans. You probably don't know much about him, but
no, he sure didn't love how the Pelicans handled us this year, though.
Yeah, but he's a big boy. He gives Sabonis a run for his money. He's 32, so he is a little older, but he's 6'11". And the only thing I have with him is he's a center, so that would move Sabonis to the 4. And that was one of the main reasons Sabonis wanted to leave the Pacers. The Pacers had Miles Turner, who's a 5, and Sabonis didn't want to be a 4. He wanted to be a center. So that's one of the things with him.
He's the one that's got some background playing with Sabonis, right?
I believe so, because they've played together overseas.
Yeah, Lithuania.
Yeah. But like I said,
so that might be interesting. You always love if there's some chemistry off the court that can help.
Yeah, as we've seen with Monk and Fox.
Exactly.
But like I said, the only problem is you'd have to move Sabonis to the 4, and is Sabonis quick enough to guard the 4s? We would definitely have
an adjustment.
Would definitely have the toughest front court, though, because you wouldn't want to go up against Sabonis and Valanciunas. So that's one name I want to say he's a free agent or a trade. I'm not sure 100%, but those are a couple names. And of course, who would the Kings possibly have to trade to get those guys? I think everyone basically it'll be Barnes, Herter, and the 13th pick, most likely. It'll be a mixture.
Yeah. And maybe some future picks, or potentially someone off the bench like Duarte or Mitchell.
I think with Keon Ellis coming up, I think he's expandable. Because unfortunately, Mitchell, he's a nice guy, but again, they got too many guards. He's too short, 6'2". He's not long, so him and Ellis are interchangeable.
Yeah, and I'm excited to kind of see what comes of Keon Ellis.
Yeah,
I think he was one of those. He was a rare bright spot for us this season.
Yeah, and he's a good story too. He's Alabama, undrafted. Kings drafted him. He was a 2-way the last 2 years, and then they finally gave him that full contract, and he just showed out. When he's a better shooter than people think. He's definitely a lot better.
Yeah, he's got some offensive potential for sure. I think he's like I said, when his defense gets going, his shooting's gotten going too, and that's if he can do that more consistently and get a little bit more playing time in, that would be obviously something we would welcome on the team.
Yeah. All right. So let's wrap it up a little. So people down below, let us know what do you think the Kings should go after this offseason? Maybe there's a name we didn't mention. Throw it out there. Let us know what you think. Are you happy?
Or
Disappointed?
who's right between the two of us with the ones we brought to the table?
Yeah. Are you happy?
Little sibling rivalry.
Are you happy? Disappointed with the Mike Brown extension? Were you expecting a little bit more? Let us know down below what you think. Don't forget to hit the subscribe, like. See you on the other side.